Good evening, everybody. It's Steve with Real Progressives. It is our Sunday night with Ellis, and I haven't talked to Ellis in a little while, so this is exciting for me. But before I get Ellis onto the screen, I want to talk to you all about something that is deeply disturbing to me as both an activist and somebody who I think of as a cerebral revolutionary. We've got a situation right now where our only shot at making change is to incredibly push information out to the world, to push it out to people that are willing to activate. Our urgency is founded by a whole bunch of right-wing challenges we have ahead of us and an incredible amount of challenges within our own movement. Unfortunately, what I have found, and this is a damning statement on our movement, many people either don't have the desire to learn or they don't have the capacity to learn. I'm going to decide in my head that it's not capacity to learn, it's desire to learn. And so rather than take the time to educate themselves on how we can actually make every one of these points that we have fought for as Bernie progressives and as Jill progressives, every one of them requires a firm understanding of economics. You cannot get there thinking you're going to tax your way to this. You cannot get there by believing that you have to chase down boogeymen of the Rothschild variety. You cannot get there thinking that you've got to end the Fed before you can save lives. You cannot get there with Milton Friedman's school of logic. And you most definitely cannot get there getting distracted by Russians and Trump. It takes an incredible amount of effort to move the Overton window in such a way that we can actually affect change. We are left with a movement full of people willing to get trapped in the mainstream media, trapped in chasing Trump. April 15th, they'll be there demanding to see his tax returns. That's got to depress every thinking human being on the planet. This is what we're left with right now, folks, unless we take charge and push this forward. You cannot get what we want getting distracted by bullshit. And let's just go into the subject matter that we're going to talk about tonight. Tonight, we're going to be discussing things that the GOP are doing while you sleep and you chase Donald Trump's tax returns. They are actively going state by state, trying to get the state houses to approve a constitutional convention. Their sole purpose of doing that is to enact a balanced budget amendment. We have talked about it. We may be the only ones talking about it, but that is going to be the subject matter for us tonight, understanding the depravity of the concept of a federal balanced budget, understanding what it would do to everyday people, and then understanding that it is actually impossible to do. So without further ado, let me bring on Ellis Winningham. Ellis, thanks for joining, sir.
How you doing?
You know what? I'd like to say I'm okay and I'm good and I'm happy, but I'm quite frankly very disappointed in how easily distracted the warriors of our movement are. And the people that we're supposed to count on to actually help us get this stuff forward, they're too busy chasing Trump's tax returns. They're too busy wanting to end the Fed. And they're too busy sucking on Milton Friedman's junk sack to get us any closer to the goal. And that's where we're at. I don't know what else to say. I really don't. It's depressing. It's extremely depressing to me.
Yeah, well, if we get a deep analysis of Trump's tax returns, that'll be full employment for us. And we'll have universal health care and everything will be wonderful just as long as we can see his tax returns. Seeing Trump's tax returns is about as useless as the Russian conspiracy argument going on. It's just a total waste of time. It's a distraction. It's obstructionist. There are so many issues going on in our economy right now. I mean, from private debt, massive amounts of private debt, to the persistent unemployment, long-term unemployment's been going on for 40 years now. These surplus fetishes around the world, you know. Let's worry about Trump's tax returns, all right? Because the hell with poverty, the hell with universal health care, the hell with education and student loan debt. We just need to see Trump's tax returns so that we can declare the orange one a liar. Guess what? Guess what we're going to do? We're going to discover. We're going to discover he's a rich man. Did you know that? We'll discover he's rich and that he didn't pay as much tax as he should have. Gee, no shit. Duh. Okay. But what is that going to do for us as far as unemployment? What's it going to do for poverty? What's it going to do for student loan? Nothing. 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 They want to get rid of Trump. See, oh, well, now we can get him out of office so you can have Mike Pence run the country. That's brilliant. Yeah.
We have every intention of having a march in D.C. on April 15th. Now, not coincidentally, my mother and father's 50th anniversary would have been that day had he lived a few more months. And so it was a special day for me to actually fight for economic justice. You know, the whole thing Bernie said is the system's rigged, and he was right. The problem is nobody cared to ask any questions beyond the system's rigged. Yeah. The moron class, this class of illiterati, has decided they're going to chase conspiracies all over the place, and there is no way to produce any forward actionable resistance when we are trapped in chasing worthlessness all over the place. And this, my friend, is exactly why I lose sleep at night. I literally dry heave knowing that there are awful people out there sitting there saying that somehow or another we're part of the establishment. I mean, this is the kind of illiteracy. And the fact is there's some people out there that would say that, and it's appalling to me, the level. I'm not even joking. I swear to God, I was holding my son earlier today, you know, and he was laughing and smiling. And all I could think of was saying to him, son, I am so sorry for the world you're going to inherit. I almost feel guilty bringing you into the world because the only shot we have of making your world better is to get the morons to stop chasing in the Fed, to get the morons to stop trying to chase after Trump's tax return, to get the moron class to focus on changing the world. And the only way we can do that is a massive, massive civil unrest and focused drive to say, we won't take it anymore. Damn it, spend on us now. And these people are literally telling us we got to chase after these damn tax returns. I swear to God, I've never been more ashamed and more powerless to my son. And I was like, God damn it, I am not going down without a fight. I'm not going down without a fight. And that's where I'm at. I've never been more disgusted in people when I watch them try to tell me about Trump. And I just look at them and like you can almost see the disgust drip off my lip. I mean, it's just like unfathomable disgust. I don't even feel mercy anymore. I don't even feel pity on the ignorance. I just feel disgust because we are literally taking a shit on the chance to make progress happen. And these guys are going to try and push for a balanced budget that will destroy any shot of fixing the environment, of getting Medicare for all, of getting free college. For all of this stuff is doable today, but we can't get our own movement to get its head out of its friggin' junk sack and out of its ass to focus on making progress. And there is nothing more disgusting, deplorable, worthless than that. And that's where I'm at. I don't know what else to do with it, Ellis.
Well, some people enjoy the struggle more than the solution. You know what I mean by that?
I do.
They like to go out and know that there's something to complain about. It makes them feel good that Trump's there, even though they say they want to get rid of Trump. makes them feel good he's there because it gives their life meaning, you know. To achieve something like universal health care, or to achieve full employment like a job guarantee, that sort of takes away everything that is this person, you know. They have nothing to complain about. That's why I say that a lot of these faux progressives are nothing more than liberals that are just disappointed with liberals. And, you know, the liberals are not tough enough. They're not left enough. But they're down with, you know, the struggle, something to complain about. Yeah, I could care less about complaints, and complaining doesn't get anybody anywhere. Action does. But then again, you've got a vast swath of the American public that claims to be progressive, yet has no idea where to begin, short of, well, we have to go after the rich, and if we don't, well, we can't do anything. And it's a curious question that I would like. There's a question I would like to ask these people. If we can't do anything unless we go after the rich, how is it that up until this time we've built a massive war machine and done everything else without going after the rich? Nobody asked this question. You know, as like I said this week, I quoted from Cicero's On Catalina, on Catiline, where he says, "Quousque tandem abateri, Catalina, patientia nostra," which means, how long do you think we'll tolerate? How long will you try our patience? You know, that's what he's asking Catiline in this phrase. He wants to know how long Catiline's going to try their patience. How long are you going to test our patience? This is a question that nobody ever asks of Congress. Do you notice that? No one ever does. Oh. No one ever goes to Nancy Pelosi when she says Russia. And you say, but what about universal health care? Russia. Yeah. Nobody says, Ms. Pelosi, how long do you think you can try our patience? Nobody asks, you know, and it's a serious question. I mean it sincerely. Why is this question not being asked? And the truth is these progressives have voted for it. They vote for it. They vote for Congress. They vote for president. You know, even if they didn't vote for Trump, they still voted for the congressmen and women who are responsible for Trump being there. And the problem is to blame Congress means they have to blame themselves. But it's easier to blame the Fed, you see, or it's easier to blame Trump. I didn't vote for him. It's hard to blame for you. You can't blame yourself, because if you do, then that means you know exactly where change has to start, and that means your thinking has to change because you're wrong.
I will tell you what else it means also, and this is the thing that makes me want to freaking just drop an elbow of truth so hard. Every one of these people, every last one of them, wants an excuse for why they are quote unquote powerless. Mm-hmm. They want to create a scenario that they can't do anything. The only way we can do something is to break out torches and burn the house down. We can't actually own our power because that would be worth full instead of worth less. And so they sit there and they literally find ways to make it so it's impossible for them to do anything. And that's why they chase the rich. That's why they sit there and chase conspiracies. Yeah. That's why they do all this shit, because doing the real thing that actually makes a change, and that is fighting and protesting and talking and collaborating and uniting for economic truth that will bring the whole fucking system to its knees, this is too much. Too much. They're too in bed with Ron Paul, nibbling on his earlobe, loving the man, cuddling him, giving him smooth love. They don't want to learn. They do not want to learn. They would rather study the deep stupid than go after the one thing they actually have some control over, and that is demanding that the Congress, hypothetically, in the worst government situation ever, when the populace is completely and utterly disgusted, even in the worst situations, the government will try to pour opiates on it to calm it down. At the worst, they would at least, let's just say every conspiracy they've ever come up with is true. The worst that would happen is we would get what we need, or they'd come out there spraying us with bullets and then we'd have a self-evident truth all of a sudden, right? Now you can burn the world down, okay? But the reality is that there's a much simpler solution. Stay focused, stay the course, fight for economic justice, remember the entire platform that Jill and Bernie put forward, and let that be your guidepost, founded by macroeconomic reality and not these bullshit fucking lies. God damn it.
Yeah, so it's like what Stephanie Kelton said, you know, these people believe that money grows on rich people. Okay. Well, if government were the source of dollars, then this creates a problem, because now there's nothing to complain about. There's no struggle. So as long as you can get the rich and have your class war, you can delay progress and prosperity for a good 50 years, at least till you're dead. Then you don't care, right? You can at least make a name for yourself in the movement and feel like that you're something. You can turn your hobby, which is politics, you can turn it into something that's a money-making enterprise for yourself. You know what I mean? You can make a name for yourself. You can become Lenin, you know? Because this is all that matters. You know, prosperity and progress doesn't matter. It's the struggle, fist in the air. All right. Well, I'm not here for that kind of bullshit. You know, I'm more or less inclined to teach people. Here's how it works. If you're willing to learn, this is how the system works. This tells you what you can do to accomplish everything you need to do right now. Naturally, this brings up the other crowd of people that think MMT is trickle-down economics. That's fun. And, you know, there's always someone out there, but I'm more interested in just teaching. That's what I've always done. And telling people, here's what you need to do, and here's what you need to know to vote, to be a well-informed citizen. Okay? And when you gain momentum, you know, these people that are obstructionists, they either are going to be forced to go with the momentum if they truly believe in progress, or they're going to get steamrolled in the end. Because one way or another, we're going to achieve this. It's coming. Universal healthcare is coming. Okay, one way or another. Job guarantee is coming. Okay, prosperity is coming. Free college is coming. There's no way to stop it. Okay, you can put your fist in the air all you want. Doesn't matter. You can obstruct now, but sooner or later the momentum's going to come, and you're going to get steamrolled right along with everybody else. So best to get on board the prosperity bandwagon and just let's get this done. If you don't want to, that's fine. You don't want to learn. If it's too tough for you to learn how things work and you'd prefer to do what conspiracy theorists do and make up stuff because it's easier to understand because, hey, you made it up. That's great and all, but I would ask that you sit down and shut up because you're not helping anybody.
Not a soul. Not a soul. And, you know, and that brings me to my next favorite point, Ellis. Mm-hmm. And that is that, you know, they're always looking for a leader. They're always looking for a savior instead of realizing that these people are public servants. They're supposed to be public servants. Instead of demanding of them, they instead go to the trouble. And forgive me, the lights,
you look like Satan.
Yes. I had a situation where the breaker blew on the, I have these floodlights that work, so you get the candlelight treatment for a minute.
Looks like the Rothschilds have got you.
Rothschilds! Yeah. But the sad...
Trying to shut you down, man.
They are, man. It's a conspiracy, dude. Conspiracy. They didn't want me to flash my tattoos or something.
Yeah.
But in any event, well, real quickly before I switch over so I can fix my power supply here, I mean, we've got a situation here, Ellis, where quite frankly, all of these things, everything that we're fighting for, every single thing that we're fighting for is an economic truth. It comes down to economics, and unfortunately, they don't want to hear it. So I'm going to switch over to you so you can save me from my lighting situation. I'll be right back.
Yeah, the fact is that a great many people are unable to see the connection between economics and various political issues. I'll give you a perfect example of one that might not sit well with some progressives who are anti-gun. I don't feel one way or another about guns. So we'll just say that to begin with. But the gun violence issue, okay, over so many years of rising gun violence, you get liberals coming up and they say, well, the solution is to just ban guns. And the solution is to hard regulate guns and ban. So then the right wing feels threatened. So here comes the NRA paying its money to buy politicians and expand gun ownership. Well, no, the only way that Americans can protect themselves from violent criminals is to own a gun. So we got to expand gun ownership, which then ticks off the liberals, and then the liberals get madder and madder and madder. And this gun ban thing goes on around and around and around, and pretty soon you've divided the country. Half the country says they're going to protect their Second Amendment right come hell or high water and end up carrying guns in Home Depot, AR-14s and whatnot. And then over here you have the progressives and the liberals that want to ban guns. And they point to Australia and they say, look, they did it in Australia and now there's no gun violence. Well, obviously, because there's no guns. Okay. But the thing is neither side in the political spectrum of the average person recognizes the real problem, the real cause of rising gun violence. The real cause is 40 years of forced long-term unemployment and bad economies. Okay. So, in truth, the real answer is not necessarily a gun grab. The real answer is to fix the economy. The real answer is prosperity. The real answer is full stomachs, you see. Okay, so that's how gun violence, an issue like that, is related to economics. Racial tensions is another one. If you spend 40 years suppressing wages and suppressing employment, keeping people permanently, literally, intentionally and deliberately involuntary unemployed and in poverty, as poverty grows and unemployment persists, including African American communities, Asian communities, and all sorts of other communities, you're going to end up having racial tensions. They're going to escalate because people are going to want to know who's to blame. And then you get these small-minded freaks that come out of their rocks and they begin telling you, well, it's the people with the thumping cars that are the problem. Yeah. And so you get racial tensions. Okay, well, how do you reduce racial tensions? What if I offered to everybody who wants a job and is willing and able to work, what if I offered them a job at a decent wage? Okay? What if I guaranteed them employment? What if I took away the student loan debt? What if I gave them universal health care? What if I gave them free college education? What if I ensured that our public schools were fully funded at all times? Oh, okay, well, over so many years, guess what's going to happen? The racial tensions are going to decrease. Okay, the solution is not to take down a flag. Right? Remember when that was a big issue. Let's go and take down a Confederate flag. Confederate flag can be, yes, it can be very offensive. But the thing is this. Taking down the flag does not stop racism or racial tensions in its tracks. It doesn't even begin to address the problem. Okay? People want to see a structural, oh, well, America's actually just racist. That's what the problem is. And so we've got to suppress mean thoughts. And it's not the problem. The problem is you've got to suppress poverty. You've got to end poverty. And we all have this means within our grasp right now. Like, for instance, if I were president tomorrow, and I had a Congress full of Warren Moslers and Stephanie Keltons, and I said, I need a job guarantee pronto. I want universal health care, and I want to make college free, and I want to get the infrastructure working. We need a lot of high capital intensity work going on, and I want to switch to green energy and see if we can get our output switching to the sustainable. Could we go ahead and do that? I would sign that in a law, and in 12 months, the economy would not resemble anything it had the last 40 years. We could do it like that. And I hadn't taxed a single rich person yet. And it's not because I don't want to tax the rich people. It's because I don't have to achieve this prosperity. Okay, once I've got people with full stomachs, and once I've got people prospering, and we no longer have to worry about poverty, and we no longer have to worry about healthcare issues, then yeah, I'm going to go to the opulently wealthy, and I'm going to say, now about that hoard of dollars that you have, okay? And I'm going to threaten to tax it at a very high rate. And you know what's going to happen? Rather than pay that tax, they're going to end up spitting that hoard of dollars into productive investment that actually benefits the economy. They're going to spit that into the economy, okay, in the hope of making future profits at another time, rather than watch me destroy every little dollar slowly and painfully for them. Okay? So, no, it's not, do not get the idea that, oh no, we're not going to tax the rich. Oh yes, we are going to tax the rich. It's just that we're not going to tax the rich to get the funds to fund this stuff, because that's not how it works. So if you're going to sit there and think, oh, well, we've got to go after capital before we can have anything that Ellis just said, then this is the reason why you spin your wheels and we go nowhere. It's because it's not possible. It's just an impossible feat. It can't be done. No, I'm saying you could tax the rich at 80%. It could be done. You know, it's going to be hard, but it could be done. But what I'm saying that cannot be done is taking the dollars from the rich and then giving them to someone else to pay for something. The only way you're going to get that to happen is on the state level or the local level. And that's it.
And Alice, you don't even need to comment on this, but just to the point of what we were saying, as far as the idiots in our midst, the people that are literally going to kneecap us, literally take a billy club right to our knees. We've got Celia in there, get rid of the Federal Reserve private banks, exclamation point. And there we go. Once again, you don't have to.
She doesn't know what she's talking about, though.
But this is what our movement is faced with, because no matter what, you got prosperity right here, right now in front of us that we could take if we would unite. But instead, they don't even care that Congress is the ones that spend or don't spend. They then, in turn, create the boogeyman that we end up spending. Not you, because thank goodness we can shield you somewhat, but us every day. We have to deal with this nonsense, this bullshit.
It's easier for this person to blame the Fed than herself. Because if you blame Congress, if she blames Congress, she has to blame herself. You blame the Fed because it's just this entity that's unelected, you know. And then you like the conspiracy of the Federal Reserve and these ideas that the U.S. government, all it can do these days is just produce these little coins and whatnot. It's just absolute stupidity. First of all, you know, we've covered this a million times. The U.S. government does not spend by printing cash. Okay, that's not how the system works anymore. All cash is based on bank customer demand for cash, not bank demand, bank customer demand for cash. And second of all, the Federal Reserve is the nation's central bank. It has not usurped authority over money creation from the U.S. government. In fact, the central bank cannot, under any circumstances, influence. It doesn't control the money supply. The money supply is bank credit. Okay, it's demand for bank credit. What it also does not do, and I want to make this very clear for people who might be misled by this person who doesn't know what they're talking about. The Federal Reserve can only set the price of bank lending. Okay. Now, when it comes to congressional spending, when Congress wants to spend, it does not go to the Federal Reserve and say, oh, please give us, please lend us. The Congress just simply sits down, creates a budget. And then from there, it orders Treasury to begin spending. How Treasury does that is simple. It just credits bank accounts. The Federal Reserve will stand ready to make sure that the reserve accounts have enough dollars in them for those payments to clear. That's all there's in those reserve accounts, and that's what they're for, to clear payments. Unless, of course, this person who wants to end the Fed would rather swipe her debit card at Walmart and then the payment doesn't go through. You know, it's just all stupidity. It's just conspiracy theory nonsense. It's a big time waster. The federal government, the U.S. government, let's just say even since 1973, okay, we'll just go back just that far. The U.S. government does the spending. The Federal Reserve does not conduct federal spending. It does not conduct fiscal policy. It only conducts monetary policy. And monetary policy is not spending. Okay, that's it. End of story. All right, so you're free to take reality if you want and say, oh, well, this is kind of interesting, or you're free to stick with your conspiracy theory garbage, but I don't have time for it because those are fairy tales. All right, I'm in the business, I'm in Adult Swim, serious business. Okay. So.
Well, I'm glad I got to chuckle a little bit. My birthday, just between you and I, my birthday is April Fool's Day. It's usually supposed to be one of the funnest days of the year for me because I usually have a lot of jokes and people are pranking me and, it's a lot of fun. But instead, most of my birthday was spent dealing with people that were trolling and lying and building myths and conspiracies and all kinds of other stuff, both personal and these fake ones. And the distractions, the amount of idiocy that we are surrounded by on a daily basis, and it's avoidable idiocy. This is stuff of people that choose. They make an active decision that it would be better to be a worthless troll and go after this stuff than it would be to take the same amount of time that they waste reading this garbage and learn so that we actually can be ready in 2018 when the next Congress comes around and in 2020 when the next president comes around. And even now, I mean, think about all the things Richard Nixon was forced to do by a willing public pushing the agenda for an EPA, et cetera. Look at what they made this man do who would have probably otherwise not done. But instead, they would rather chase after boogeymen, Trump's tax returns, and any other manner of worthlessness. And it's got me nuts.
Yes, it's what the Democratic Party does, chasing after those tax returns and whatnot. So at least you feel like you're part of something, You feel like you're involved in something very important because the all-important Democratic Party is doing it. So if they're doing it and I join in, I can be popular.
It's got to be a joiner mentality. It's something, it's like I don't have a place. So
I'm heterodox, so I give a shit. I could give a shit about popularity, as you can understand. My views are not very popular whatsoever. But you know what? Another way you can look at this whole thing and this that you call worthless. These people and these trolls and stuff. In the intelligence community, there's a saying that when you're over the target because you start catching flack. Okay, the bomber pilot knows when he's over the target or nearing the target because he starts catching flack. When you start provoking people to spend their time attacking you personally, trying to shut you down, trying to discredit you, you know that you're getting very close to the target, and they're uncomfortable with that. In other words, it's how you know you're winning. MMT, like I said 5 years ago, people in the mainstream economists, they knew all about us, and they say, well, we already knew this. We already knew this. You're not contributing anything new. 5 years later now, they take us so seriously, they've got to go out there and plaster MMT all over the place, calling it, the people, cult members and all this stuff. They're going to do everything they can to discredit it, but that's how you know that MMT, the movement, is getting a little bit too much momentum for their comfort. And they're going to try and stop it, but the problem is that you can't now. No. People are done with the hopeless narrative. People are done with the scarcity narrative that was never true to begin with. Economics is all about scarcity. It's not. Macroeconomics is about efficiency. Always has been, always will be. End of story. All right. The scarcity narrative just doesn't wash with people. People, 40 years, people get really tired of hearing, oh, we can't afford this. We got to find cuts to pay for that. And each time you vote Republican or Democrat, nothing changes. Same old narrative, though. Republicans and Democrats both agree the national debt's a crisis. U.S. dollars come from somewhere in the private sector. Taxes are funding the spending. It's got to borrow from China. This is just a bunch of BS. People get tired of hearing that because there's no hope in that message. And when someone comes along with hope, And not only that, but with an argument that has no logical problems whatsoever, that you can attack from any angle and make it work. That's very threatening. It's very threatening to the powers that be. It's very threatening to people who prefer to believe themselves intelligent. It's also threatening to people's hobbies.
Exactly. I mean, Joe Firestone, Joe has got this really, really comprehensive view of the Pete Peterson Foundation,
Yes, he does.
that is actively pushing austerity on America, who has gone out there and has pushed every debt and deficit fear that is possible. Now we're here, just two guys. People are like, what are your credentials, man? What are your credentials? You know what I mean? Fuck you, sideways and inside out, every other way I can do it.
Yeah.
And the reality is that I'm asking them point blank. I'm saying, listen, fuck my credentials. They're behind me. The only reason they're behind me is to shut down losers. Okay. But the reality is that they don't mean anything. Reality is not taught in college even right now. Most of it is taught in fantasy land pre-1971, and almost all of it lives and dies in a fake world.
If it's economics, yes.
Yes. And well, that's the point when it comes to economics. So I say, hey, you don't have to take my word for it. I'm not a published economist. You can take Stephanie Kelton and L. Randall Wray, and you can take Pavlina, and you can take Scott Bollweiler, and you can take Bill Black, who was largely predictive of he was the one that uncovered the bullshit with the crisis, housing crisis in 2008, 2009, et cetera. You can take MMT at its word, and you can look these folks up, and they will prove it in spades. And the sad thing is that the detractors at the higher levels, they don't detract from what they're saying. They're like, wow, what would happen if this information got in the hands of the proles? What would happen if regular people knew?
It'd be a national security issue.
Oh my!
It'd be a national security. It's you know how many people know about MMT right now? How many are learning it worldwide? Okay, and how many people agree with it? Are willing to accept reality? Do you see a national security issue? No. There isn't going to be one either. It's just another excuse. Like Pete Peterson. Do you need credentials to criticize Pete Peterson? Gee, I didn't know that. Thanks for protecting billionaires. Talk about me being a billionaire, Lola. Jesus Christ. Come on.
Yep.
Don't attack Pete Peterson unless you have the credentials necessary. Okay, well, let's all just go home. Stephanie Kelton has credentials, but no, she's not allowed to because she's from, a different place than the mainstream is. She's one of those weirdo heterodox. She's probably a communist.
Can you
imagine? Down communist.
Can you imagine the abolitionists during the slave time were heterodox citizens? Mm-hmm. They were heterodox citizens. Luther, when he broke away from the Catholic penances and all the other stuff, he was a heterodox, minister, if you will. Yeah. Anything that falls outside the mainstream, trying to change the way things are and looks at through the lens and destroys the narratives, is outside the orthodoxy. Yeah. That's where we're at, folks. And when people say that we are part of the establishment,
that's hilarious.
By its very definition, it should show you that they have stolen one breath too many. They have been allowed to speak one word too many. Every waking moment, what they have done is proven their existence a waste. I'm serious. I can't stress this enough. I won't mention the people by name. You know who they are. You see them. Literally, they don't even know what the word heterodox means. What does that mean? If they want to say think about how stupid you'd have to be to speak past your knowledge level and speak authoritatively. At that, speak softly, keep your head down, eyes lowered a little bit, ask questions. Don't puff up and act like you know if you don't know.
There's nothing wrong. Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt, but there's nothing wrong, nothing shameful about asking questions if you don't know.
At all. Nothing.
If you don't know what the word heterodox means, that's cool. I'm not going to look at you and call you an idiot. You know, if you don't understand heterodox economic opinion, as you would call it, opinion, or if you don't understand post-Keynesian MMT, then, you know, there's no shame in saying, okay, well, explain this to me, how MMT describes this, that, and the other. Okay, well, you know, no shame. Well, let's explain it. But if you're going to come at me with a I don't know, a shotgun, and you know, threaten people and intimidate people and stuff, calling people losers and establishment suck asses and whatnot. It's very important for you to understand that heterodox is not the establishment. All right, it's very important for you to understand 4 key things. The U.S. government is broke. All right. 2, the U.S. government must collect taxes and redistribute that money. It must respend that money in order to be able to afford to spend. It must borrow from China to afford to spend. And the national debt is very real, and it's a very big threat to our safety and security. These 4 things are not heterodox. They are establishment beliefs. So when you accuse someone of a heterodox viewpoint, saying that a person who says federal taxes don't fund federal spending, the federal government does not borrow, the federal government is the creator of the dollar, okay, spends them into existence, it can never go broke, and the national debt is a bunch of savings accounts, very hard to understand how that's establishment. Because if it were, there'd be no poverty. Okay, so that just shows you how dumb the argument is, and you can probably reason that the person doesn't care what the meaning of heterodox means. They have an agenda. They have a political axe to grind, and they're going to grind it, you know, come hell or high water. They want to make a name for themselves. What can I say? They want to take to social media so that they can become what Lenin was at one time. You can just become a great leader out of obscurity. They have dreams of fame and fortune, okay? But you're not going to get anywhere, dreams of fame and fortune, telling people the same shit that we've been telling people for years. Taxes, fund spending, borrow from China, we're all going to die, inflation. I mean, nobody cares to hear this shit anymore. In fact, I'll wager in about 5 more years, people that say this will be very annoying. Things are going to start changing, and people that spout off this nonsense are going to be viewed as annoying people. Okay?
Absolutely. So here's the thing. With the way I introduced this stream tonight, I spoke quite clearly that the GOP is going state by state by state, based on fears of debt and deficit. Based on fear porn about the debt and deficits. Stuff we have explained, Randall Wray has explained, Pavlina, Ellis, you name it, Fidel, Stephen Hale, on and on and on and on and on have explained ad nauseum. Rowan Gray has explained ad nauseum that there is no fear. There's nothing here to fear, okay? But they are going state by state to create a constitutional convention. How many of you are comfortable with the current crop of people, including progressives, by the way, who still hawk the Federal Reserve's a private banking cabal, blah, 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 and all these other people that want to cut spending, talk about, you want them to create a new constitution? Folks, think it through. Think about what I'm saying. If this doesn't make your skin crawl, absolutely nothing will. Absolutely nothing will keep you up at night if you don't realize how horrible the idea of this crop of ignorati, people that will not even bother cracking the pages of a book, people that will not read a link. They won't even click on an effing link. These people want to be in power to create a new constitution, folks, that laws will be written from. These people want to do that. If that doesn't make your hair stand on end, nothing will. And then you add in the fact that they're economically illiterate. And you should be petrified. If you have children, kiss them goodnight, man. You better take good care of them. If you don't have kids, stay away from having them if this happens. You will be bringing them into the worst shit show you have ever seen in your life. It is that frightening. And this is what keeps me up at night, folks. This is what drives me. And if you don't like my attitude, trust me, my family doesn't like it either, because I am petrified of idiocy, taking our lives and putting it in their hands. Economic illiterates that just saunter about saying things about the Federal Reserve, saying things about this and that, don't know their ass from their elbow, but they want to rewrite the Constitution. That is petrifying. You know,
it's also important, before we get into that, it's also important that you let your viewers understand, you help your viewers there to understand that people that support this end the Fed mainstream narrative and all this federal taxes, funds, federal spending, and all this deficit debt nonsense, progressives that support that are actually enabling the GOP in their efforts to achieve a balanced budget amendment. You got to think about that, because you're literally pouring fuel on the fire of the balanced budget amendment. Each time you go around and say that deficits are bad, surpluses are good, and we've got to pay down that national debt. Each time you say that, you give the GOP ammunition to go out and fix. Well, we're going to fix it. Get a balanced budget amendment. Even though our balanced budget amendment is economic suicide. I mean, you go for it, man. If you want chaos to reign, there you go. All right.
Okay, so hold on. Let's talk about chaos for a minute, right? So one of the things that was obviously this has been everybody that learns, this is a process. There is no everything comes to you in one moment. There is a light bulb moment where you realize we're not broke. And when that light bulb happens, you can't unsee it. But there are many other light bulb moments through this process, okay? Mm-hmm. And I think the most incredibly difficult one for me right now is recognizing, as I watch my aging mother and knowing that she's been able to somehow or another live off her and my father's pension that none of us have anymore, and she's able to have some Social Security to help survive through these lean times. And be able to have some benefits and so forth. None of us have any of that at all. Not one of us do anymore. That's gone. Some people may have something that they got for years and years ago, but most people today, your new crop today, are born and bred into the neoliberal nightmare of nothing. You've got nothing, not a damn thing to retire on. You've got nothing. You have to work till your back snaps. And they're telling you that Social Security is broke. And when you sit there and you try to tell them that it's a lie, number one, and number two, that FICA itself does not pay for freaking anything, it's deleted just like every other tax is deleted. They go apoplectic. And the one thing that could save these programs, the one thing that could expand them and give us life more abundant, the very people we're trying to protect will tell you, you're crazy. I've paid into Social Security my whole life. You're a liar. You're a right-winger. You're this, you're that, you're the other. And it's like...
That makes FDR a liar.
Yes.
FDR admitted that the tax does not fund Social Security. He admitted that himself. He admitted that all it was a political measure to make the people think they had a vested interest in it, so that they would protect his program from politicians that wanted to kill it. As long as you know, or think you know, that it's your money, you're going to protect it. You're going to fight to protect it from politicians who want to kill the program, because it's your money. In reality, it's not. It's the government's money. It's everybody's money, but nobody's. It doesn't come from anybody's pocket. Okay? The government simply manufactures it on the fly. It spends it into existence to pay these benefits. The FICA tax just controls spending power. That's it. But the FICA tax allows the government to put that information down on a spreadsheet so that it knows how much you have paid in FICA taxes, so it can determine whether or not you qualify for benefits, or how much, or disability, or this, that, and the other. That's it. You don't get that. You don't give you. They don't put it off into a bank account with your name on it and say, "We're going to save it for you. That way you won't spend it." Hell, you could do that yourself. Okay.
Ellis, you talked to me. One of the big light bulb moments for me was the fact that most of these programs out there, from food stamps, SNAP, TANF, things like that, these subsidies to the farms and so forth, they aren't really intended to particularly help the people. They're really automatic stabilizers built into the economy to keep it from imploding across the board. Can you explain what a balanced budget? Well, talk about these things.
Programs like SNAP or welfare or unemployment insurance are what we call automatic stabilizers. And most Western nations, okay, employ some form of automatic stabilizer. And the reason why they do this is because they recognize that the national government, whether that be the US government, the Canadian government, the Australian government, the UK government, the national government is the issuer of currency. Okay, and when it deficit spends, that's income for the private sector. All right. So when you create an automatic stabilizer, what you're doing is you're creating an automatic means for the deficit to increase so that dollars are injected into the private sector to keep consumer spending at a certain level. It creates a floor in the economy through which consumer spending cannot fall. So like, for instance, with SNAP, when people lose their job or become too poor, they cannot afford food, they go to the government, they apply for SNAP, they start receiving food stamps, they start receiving benefits, and they spend it on food. This ensures that the poor workers at Walmart and local grocery stores do not get fired. The reason why is because people are still spending on food. So in a downturn, consumer spending is still maintained on food, you see. So as people lose their jobs in a downturn and apply for SNAP benefits, the deficit automatically increases. It automatically goes up because the government is automatically injecting more dollars into the economy to keep consumer spending alive. Because if it didn't, the downturn would be even worse. Okay, so it's real simple. Now, Social Security, and that's not an automatic stabilizer, but like welfare, SNAP, unemployment insurance, they all serve a purpose, right? And you can say that well, they do in fact help people, which they do. Okay, but the main purpose, as far as macroeconomics is concerned, the economic purpose is to maintain consumer spending in the event of a downturn. Okay, that's what they do. All right. So when we talk about an automatic stabilizer, one last time, we're talking about something that automatically increases the federal deficit without action of Congress, without politicians having to act. The deficit just automatically increases because the program is designed to do that, to automatically increase it. All right. And so where this plays into a balanced budget is it's quite clear. A balanced budget means that whatever the government spends, it must also tax so that government spending reaches zero. So if it spends $4 trillion, then it must tax $4 trillion in that fiscal year in order to reach zero. Automatic stabilizers, however, will continue to operate. And so you can never get the deficit to zero unless you deliberately take a chainsaw to the legs of the automatic stabilizers. And when you do that, you're taking a chainsaw to the legs of the floor in consumer spending, and then the floor falls through. So that's just brilliant, isn't it? It's a brilliant amount of stupidity.
It is. And honest to God, this is no joke. Sherrod Brown, at one time, he may still, I don't know, Sherrod Brown was one of the quote-unquote progressive champions that signed on for a balanced budget. Dennis Kucinich was on record as going yay team for a balanced budget. There were so many of these so-called progressives out there actively championing for it.
But then again, one can only conclude that either malicious intent exists or genuine stupidity, ignorant, unknowing, unwitting. So assuming, therefore, that all US dollars just somehow magically generate in the private sector, they're counterfeit. And then here comes the US government wanting to tax people so it can collect counterfeit dollars to spend. Okay, so this is the assumption that these people are going on, that the US government has no money of its own. It is incapable of creating US dollars and spending them. And so it must tax or borrow. Okay, it has to have an income and it has to borrow if it wants to spend beyond its income. They're operating on this premise. And this is what we discussed last week, was the gold standard. That's what they're operating on. They're operating on the premise that the year is 1920. It's just stupidity. It's blatant stupidity. To assume that the US government has the authority to tax, has the authority to declare war, the authority to imprison, the authority to execute for treason, the authority to meddle in the affairs of foreign nations, but just can't create a dollar. I mean, the level of nonsense is pathetic, okay? It's really stupid. This all harkens back to the gold standard era, when the government had to tax or borrow to defend the gold supply. And that's all it harkens back to. But when you think about it for just a moment, like I said last week, even during the gold standard, the government was still the currency issuer. The US government still issued the US dollar. It just pegged its US dollar to gold. Okay? It didn't issue gold, it issued the dollar. It was never broke, couldn't go broke. It could run out of gold, couldn't run out of its own US dollars, because all it would have to do is say, okay, well, we're suspending the gold standard and start spending, which is exactly what FDR did. And then World War II came, and that's exactly what we continued to do. How do you think we funded the war? I mean, you think we taxed and borrowed our way to victory in the Pacific and over there in Europe? No. No. We suspended the gold standard for a reason. Okay? So,
well, hold on. That brings up a great point. Many people that actually start to sniff around the truth, they start getting closer to the truth. They say, the only thing that this allows us to do is to go to war. Having a deficit doesn't allow us to actually do anything good for people. It's only about trickle-down economics. It all goes to the rich. They're confusing policy with truth. And what we're trying to say is we can flip the script if we so choose to fight and demand. I mean, fire burns you, but it also cooks your food.
Yeah, I mean, if I want to, if Steve, if we get in there and what we do is we start deficit spending, we expand the federal deficit for full employment and the public purpose, right? Meaning we spend for full employment and then we spend for universal health care, infrastructure modernization, green energy, all this stuff. It's undeniable that as consumers spend, some of that money is going to start flowing to the rich people, okay? But if we have a huge tax imposed, right, on the rich to begin with, so their income is hampered, then what's the problem? I fail to understand the problem. I don't, and furthermore, if I don't have a huge tax on the rich, and I'm still doing this, and there are full stomachs, and there's prosperity, and there is no inflation, what's the problem? You're mad at the rich, and you can't take your pitchforks and go get Frankenstein's monster? You're bored? Okay, well, what? Well, that only tells me one thing. Then if I have laws in place where the rich can no longer influence legislation with their money, okay, and that's all been fixed, and you have a situation of prosperity across the entire economy. There's no more poverty. But you're still mad because we haven't socked it to the rich hard enough, then you don't care about prosperity. You don't care about universal health care. You don't care about free education. You don't care about the infrastructure, and you don't care about green energy. You're in this because you want revenge. It's just that simple. Revenge don't fill stomachs, okay? Revenge doesn't help a homeless family that's lost the home to foreclosure through no fault of their own. Revenge does not employ somebody. It doesn't employ an entire labor force, all right? You guys, it's real easy to understand. You spend for prosperity first. Then you go after the rich. You can even go after the rich at the same time, but what you can't do is say, uh-oh, well, the rich blocked our attempts to get those tax increases extraordinarily high, so I guess we can't spend for prosperity any longer. That's wrong. No, you continue with the program. You keep on spending. Get the rich later. Okay, if you can't get them now, then wait until you have full stomachs and people are willing to turn a blind eye. When they know that the rich are not relevant to prosperity. Okay, when they, as Stephanie Kelton says, you know what we said about in the beginning here, money doesn't grow on rich people. When people realize that the dollars don't grow on rich people, they'll realize that the rich are irrelevant. They're totally irrelevant, okay, to anything. They're just irrelevant, right? You don't need them. You don't need their dollars for prosperity. You need their dollars maybe for better equity. Great, fantastic. But we can create better equity by spending for prosperity. We can do that right now and get it done now, okay? The support of a balanced budget amendment, though, I want to just sit and laugh the rest of the time that we're on here because the thoughts of it, yeah, you know, people, you take it seriously and it's frightening. I understand that, but from my perspective, it's absolutely amazingly humorous because the level of stupidity is just that thick. For these people to sit there and assume that the US government can do all these things, it can prosecute war, they can go to war with Russia and win it too, but just can't create a dollar. You got something wrong up here, all right? So the idea is we need to balance the budget, not the economy. We got to trust that the private sector can balance the economy. They can balance itself. That's like saying we've got to trust that a daycare full of 2-year-olds can change their own diapers and feed themselves. We need to go out bowling. That's about dumb. All right. That's exactly what the balanced budget amendment assumes. That the private sector can easily ensure that the economy is balanced. Okay. As long as the federal government's budget is balanced. That's, like I said, it's the same thing as assuming that a daycare full of 2-year-olds don't need adult supervision. They can change their diapers, they can feed themselves, the adults can go out, have a beer, and go bowling. Okay? Because, hey, don't mind your kids, let them go. They'll be fine. Nothing will burn down. What could happen? You're going to find out that with a balanced budget amendment on a long enough timeline, the economy will look as though it were at one time a room filled with about 100 2-year-olds that weren't supervised. It's going to be a smoking fucking crater. And it can't work. It's not sustainable. These people who propose it will be back before you know it, just like the Volstead Act. Well, we kind of like beer after all. Right? We kind of like having dollars after all. They're going to go back and they're going to try and find a way around it. Okay? They're either going to directly violate the amendment and start spending anyway and not give a shit, or they're going to repeal it. Because once the automatic stabilizers kick in, and they find that they cannot balance that budget unless they take a saw to SNAP and to unemployment insurance and this, that, and the other, that's an automatic stabilizer. And they say, okay, here we go. But then suddenly the deficit continues. Well, we're going to have to reduce it deliberately even further. And pretty soon it's going to start eating into pet projects and portfolio spending. It's going to start eating into infrastructure if we ever try and work on it. It's going to start eating into corporate welfare. It's going to start eating into the military. We have a problem. Right? We can't cut anymore. We just can't cut anymore. But by the time they would reach that point, the U.S. domestic economy would look like a smoking crater. That's because a balanced budget amendment is economic suicide. You're basically telling the monopoly issuer of US dollars, the only source of US dollars in existence, you're telling it it's not allowed to give us money anymore. It's just not allowed to operate a modern monetary economy. It's not allowed to fund the private sector. The private sector no longer wants an income. We can't stand income. We got to stop it now. We want to be poor as poor can be. We want our streets to look as though the Armageddon train just kept running over it, right? Running over it. And by the time you get a good taste of that, even the GOP will be trying to figure out a way around it. It can't be sustained.
How many people would have to die, though?
Ask Pete Peterson.
Yeah, well, I mean, but my point is that there are people in our midst, this is no joke, in our midst, that would support a balanced budget.
Wow.
And I've had some people who have said, what's so wrong with it? Sounds like you're just trying to find excuses to give the rich more money.
See, that's the thing. How do you think that a balanced budget amendment doesn't benefit the rich? How do you think that doesn't benefit Pete Peterson? When you are rich enough to vacate any dependence on deficit spending, when you are rich enough to vacate any dependence on the federal government deficit spending, and you can weather any recession, no matter how bad it is, you're going to support a balanced budget amendment because there's a way to profit. There's a way to profit from that. Hey, kill Social Security, okay? It's clear with a balanced budget amendment, we just can't afford it anymore. We need to kill it and privatize it so Pete Peterson can loot it. You see, that's what he wants to do. And he's going to make a hell of a lot of money. That's why these rich people support austerity. Why do you think banks and Wall Street supports austerity and deficit reduction? Because the further the government reduces the deficit, the more opportunity they have to make profit in the form of interest by giving you an alternative to a US dollar called a credit card or bank loan. Okay? That's the only way you can keep consumption going. It's the only way you can keep jobs from being destroyed is consumers keep on spending. So if you're not going to allow the government to do its job and issue and spend US dollars into existence, the only other choice you have is, well, bank loans, credit cards, all right? The whole point that people need to understand is that a balanced budget is rarely appropriate. It is rarely appropriate. A surplus is rarely appropriate unless there's a current account surplus of significant size so that the external sector can finance the domestic private sector. Beyond that, it's not going to happen.
It's said slightly differently, unless we are suddenly exporting a lot of shit.
A shit ton.
I mean, a megaton.
Like Norway. Norway, perfect example. Norway. Lots of exporting going on.
Unless we are exporting our asses off, we have got to be in this position to deficit spend. I mean, period.
Right. As long as you're going to do what we're doing now, there's nothing you can do about it. Okay. As long as we're going to be importing more than we're exporting, you cannot run a balanced budget because that would be suicide. You'd burn the private sector down. You would force the private sector to handle the adjustments because as the dollars are flowing out to non-residents' hands, buying the imports, the dollars are going to be flowing out of the domestic private sector. All right? They keep flowing out. A balanced budget would force the private sector to make the adjustment. How can it do that when it doesn't issue currency? Well, bank loans.
And that is, I mean, you did this, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago on the neoliberalism. It was a 2-hour episode. And you explained to folks that the bottom line is that as they leveled off spending and they kept dropping spending, it put you and I into this position where we had to finance our lives. So here's a benefit that benefits the wealthy. Again, Wall Street, again, pushes up again.
Right, that's exactly what I just said. It benefits Wall Street. I mean, if you cut the federal deficit, What you're doing is you are, in the face of a current account deficit, mind you, which is what we have, we're importing more than we're exporting. So if you are going to deliberately kill the deficit and balance the federal budget, you're literally not going to be allowing any more new US dollars to enter the economy. All right? If you're not going to do that, somebody has to do something, because the domestic private sector has to keep spending in order for jobs to be maintained. Otherwise, you're going to have a massive recession. So the only thing you can do, if you're not going to let the government spend, is you're going to have to let banks come in with an alternative to a US dollar, which is called a bank IOU. Okay? It's bank loans, credit cards. And these will, you can spend these bank IOUs just like you could a US dollar, and they'll behave just like a US dollar. Because, you know, the banks denominate their IOUs in the government's unit of account, so they're acceptable to clear tax liabilities. That means they'll behave just like a US dollar. You can go out and buy an apple with a credit card. You can buy a car with a credit card. You can buy clothes, shoes, whatever you want. And each time you do, you make sure that some poor sod isn't going to lose his job at JCPenney or at Walmart. Okay? But eventually, consumers on aggregate, that means on the whole, are not going to be able to take on any more debt. And in the absence of federal spending, because you've got a balanced budget, what's left? The consumer spending must stop. And when it does, unemployment will skyrocket. And the federal government, whichever party's in control during a balanced budget, they're going to try and figure out desperately how they're going to boost consumer spending, or how they're going to fix things. You know, you might even hear some stupid nonsense about how, well, if we gave businesses tax credits, they'd create jobs. That, you know, trickle down. That's not what we're talking about. I'm not talking about giving a business a goddamn thing. I'm talking about giving consumers actual dollars and letting them give the businesses the dollars, okay, by buying something, which is how an economy works. But a balanced budget amendment is going to force all sorts of nonsense. Like I said, it's going to start off, and they're going to be reducing the deficit down towards balance. Then the automatic stabilizers are going to kick in when unemployment increases, because the federal government is not deficit spending enough to maintain unemployment or maintain employment level. Because the federal government is the only entity that can eliminate unemployment. It both causes it, and it is the only entity that can eliminate unemployment, which it does through net spending, which is deficit spending. If it is not adding dollars, then the unemployment rate is going to go up. As it does that, people are going to lose their jobs, and they're going to go to the government, and they're going to apply for SNAP. They're going to apply for welfare. They're going to apply for unemployment insurance. And then deficit will automatically increase. And then Trump will scratch his head. Well, he'll scratch his ass. And, you know, Paul Ryan will scratch his head. Maybe he's nuts. And he'll say, well, I wonder why the deficit's going up. We've been cutting. It just seems like it's automatically going up without us doing anything. We got to cut it. So they're going to say, find out where the money's being spent. And they'll say, well, it's coming from SNAP, welfare, TANF, unemployment insurance, Mr. Ryan. Oh, well, we better cut those. Do it in a downturn, I dare you. Watch the recession become a depression. All right? You're doomed. You're doomed. It's not going to work. Not going to work.
The states themselves are heavily dependent on federal subsidies to survive. Mm-hmm. The state of Pennsylvania, I said this earlier today, is actually, I think I said it the other night, $600 million in deficit at the state level. So much of what each of these states requires has to come from the federal government, because the states are not currency issuers. They don't have the ability. They're just like you and I, maybe have a little bit more access to funds and so forth than we do. But bottom line is, they are constrained damn near as closely as we are. If revenue's not there, they can't.
It's similar.
Exactly. So when we're looking at the hierarchy of destruction, it doesn't just start at the federal level. It works its way down at the state level. All of a sudden, state governments start laying people off. All of a sudden, state services start getting cut. All of a sudden, schools can't afford things. All of a sudden, the individuals that are laid off now are sucking benefits, sucking on the government teat.
They won't when they cut those.
Exactly. This
You
is
got to balance the budget.
the hierarchy of all the destruction and calamity that comes from this. And I swear on my life, and we'll put a bow on this because I know that we're looking at trying to finish up here shortly. But when you look at the way this impacts each and every one of our lives, how can there be anyone worrying about Donald Trump's fucking tax returns? I don't understand it.
It's a distraction.
It is a pure distraction.
Yeah, it is.
And I don't know. With that, Ellis, let me give you the final word on balanced budgets and where to go from here.
You can't have a balanced budget. You can't have a balanced budget amendment. That's economic suicide. But you can't have a balanced budget when you're importing more than you're exporting. And no, there's not much you can do about that at all. All right? But what's very clear, what's very, very important needs to be understood is the reason why a balanced budget amendment would be economic suicide is because the fundamental rule of macroeconomics is somebody's spending is somebody's income. If Steve Grumbine is not spending, there's some poor person working at Walmart or working at Osco's or working at Walgreens that's going to lose their job eventually because business income will fall. Because consumer spending is business income. And business uses that income to pay employees. The only way that you can add more jobs is if consumer spending places an increased demand on business to increase its production. It will then hire more workers to meet that demand. With a balanced budget amendment, the government's not adding any new dollars. When it's not doing that, okay, you're all done. Consumers will stop spending. When they do, unemployment will then begin to rise. And those people who have lost their jobs will go to the government and apply for benefits. They'll apply for SNAP, welfare. They'll apply for unemployment insurance. But as soon as they realize that the deficit is automatically increasing because of that, they will kill those programs. They will take cuts to those programs. And when they do, consumer spending will then collapse. And what was just a simple downturn, which became a recession, will now become a depression. And that's the way it's going to be. There's no way out of that unless the government starts spending. And it can't when there's a balanced budget amendment, right? So good luck in trying to convince the politicians who are supporting it, because they're not going to listen, okay? But what you can do en masse is to tell the truth about what's really going on, how things really work, okay? Keep calling the switchboards anyway. Keep calling your congresspersons, even though they're idiots and they're bought and paid for. Doesn't matter. Keep calling them. Keep your activism up. Keep contacting. Keep protesting. Put pressure on this to bring it down. Make the amendment fail. It has to. Because here's the truth. If the amendment does not fail in its passage, and it does get passed, it's going to fail later. But when it fails later, people like Pete Peterson and the rich, and banks, they're going to be just fine. It's you who are going to pay the price. And remember, they did it to you. Okay? And if you didn't do anything to stop this, you asked for it. All right? This is why it's so utterly important for you to begin learning. Even if you just want to approach MMTs like with doubts, it's perfectly fine. I would ask you, and I ask you the same thing that I would ask anybody. If you want to come and learn MMT from me, all I ask you to do is come in with the approach, with the attitude that it's the same as if you were taking a college course on German and you didn't speak German and you just wanted to learn German. Okay? You just want to learn MMT. Not disagree with it, not this, that. Just learn what it says. I will guarantee if you come in there, if you drop the politics, if you drop your ideology and you just listen and learn and take the time to actually learn, the light bulbs will come on. And then you don't have to worry about disagreeing with it because you'll see how rational it really is. It makes sense. The reason why it makes sense is because it's reality. Okay? But I find the balance, you understand me why I laugh at the balanced budget thing. Because it's just pure stupidity, you know. I know Steve understands why I'm laughing. I'm not laughing at the potential carnage and suffering. I'm just laughing at, these are people who are literally found a gun that is loaded and it's lying in a field. And there's about 18 of them. And they all decided to sit down with the gun and say, stick the barrel against your nose and smell it. All right? They're playing with a loaded gun here. Okay? The only thing is that they're not the ones putting it to their nose. They're putting it to your nose and telling you to smell the barrel. They're putting the barrel in your face, in the people's face, and they're willing to pull the trigger and see if it goes off. As long as it doesn't harm them. And I guarantee you it won't. It'll harm them politically in the end. But, you know, hell, if you're going to buy into that Russia thing, they're probably going to keep their seats for another 20 years. Oh, well. Yeah.
Well, Ellis, I tell you what, this was a great one because, you know, we looked at everything across the board. And, you know,
we didn't do sectoral balances in depth.
But you know what, though? If we would have gone into sectoral balances, for the most part, the people that understand these things already know them. We did talk about it. We talked about how if we're a net exporter, we're a net importer, we got to spend. And that really, quite frankly, I mean, if you start getting down into debt instrument levels and all this other stuff, a lot of people's eyes start glazing over. And we just need to get people focused and get them in motion towards moving towards the goal. I think some people get caught up when we start talking, we start getting into the deeper issues. I think, you know, there's these people that have these random questions that throw you all over the place. And they don't know the underlying questions to begin with, but they'll ask you one strange over here that they heard somewhere. The reality is that all folks need to know is, number one, the United States is not broke in any way, shape, or form. It may be broken because people are not educated and because our government has kept us stupid. That's broken, but it's not broke financially. And it can never be broke. It's a choice to be broke. If we choose not to spend, then we may as well go ahead and nail it in because it's the only thing keeping us afloat. There is no finite amount of dollars. The only thing finite is our imagination on how to use that power. And right now, we are completely and utterly cut off from progress.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway,
For now.
Our goal is to make sure people wake up. All right. Well, with that, I want to thank you very much for joining us again. Tomorrow night, I'm going to have researcher Nathan Tankus join me. And then Tuesday, I'm going to have Fidel Kaboub back onto the show. And we are going to talk some more MMT. Wednesday night, you'll be back with Mike Sionato. And then the rest of the week, who knows where we're going. So with that, have a great night, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.